After repeated reports about Jacksonville City Council members communicating with each other outside of public forums, my next guest reached out to the district's top prosecutor to investigate. Here to explain why she's asking and what, if anything, she's heard so far in response is Government Relations Attorney Leslie Jean-Bart, president of the Duval County Democratic Black Caucus. Good morning, Leslie. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
So, remind us how all of this began. There was some reporting that came out after a meeting of the um, neighborhoods committee
Yeah.
of the city council.
hmm
Remind us what happened at that meeting and why that caught your attention.
So there was a news story about the neighborhoods committee, and during that committee meeting, it was publicly stated that they were texting Council President Kevin Carrico because there were amendments up on one of his bills, wanting to know if it was okay, if the amendments were okay. Basically, is it okay for us to vote on these amendments? And this was publicly stated during the committee meeting. And so, texting during a committee meeting to other members of your governing body, first of all, raises red flags. And then the extent, that they're basically getting the okay to vote on amendments. There was a story about it and it came out, and there was a lot of attention when that first came out. It was covered by a lot of people. And I shared the story with some friends of mine, and I said, Melissa Nelson, our state attorney, should really investigate this. And all of them said, oh, she's not going to do it. And I said, yeah, she is. And so I wrote the letter like, yeah, let me make sure this happens because, why are people thinking that she wouldn't investigate it? So as president of the Democratic Black Caucus, I draft a letter and I sent it to the state attorney. I also have quite the memory for politics in Jacksonville. And so I keenly remember the 2018 investigation into Garrett Dennis, Anna Brochet, Katrina Brown, Reggie Gaffney, Reggie Brown. That
I'm going
what?
to stop you for a
Yeah.
second because I want to come back to that
Yeah.
investigation.
Okay.
But I do want to make sure that we're clear. So these were members of the committee. These were members, city council members texting other city council members, and they were not making any bones about the fact that that's what they were doing. It was a public meeting,
Right.
as you say, it was reported on.
Right.
And so, my understanding from what they've said since that reporting was that, look, this was not a substantive discussion of policy matters. This was a procedural question only. Can we vote on this? Are you okay with these amendments? And, obviously they didn't make any attempt to hide it. So why does that strike you as problematic?
So first of all, they claimed that this was purely procedural, which is that's not like an exception to the Sunshine Law. Any discussion that goes into matters that are coming before the governing body are covered by the Sunshine Law. Asking if the bill sponsor is okay with amendments is basically part of the decision process that these individuals are making. So this is part of what covers, in the Sunshine Law. So the idea that this is purely procedural is just I don't know, excuse, but it's not a valid excuse. And so that was why I was really shocked that they were stating that because first of all, it's wrong. And if they really think that, then how much more is going on that they think is not a violation of the Sunshine Law?
It's worth noting that there has been some guidance issued by the Office of General Counsel, that's
hmm
the city attorney that advises branches of government. And the former general counsel, Jason Gabriel, who's actually looks like probably could be hired back for some contract work for the current council. So they obviously put a lot of credence in his work, said in a 2015 memo, quote, texting between council members carries with it an extraordinarily high risk that such messages would be considered unlawful. And he also said that, in terms of the process or whether something is, I mean, he wasn't specifically addressing a procedural excuse, but he said that, not only are the final decisions to be made in the open, but the entire discussion making process itself is required to be conducted in public. And I guess that's because whether it's a procedural matter, putting an amendment onto a bill or not, at some point that does become a substantive consideration. It's part of the bill.
Right. Absolutely. And it's part of their decision-making process, evidently. They were not willing to vote on the amendment until they found out how, President Carrico felt about the amendments. And, that memo that was done by Jason Gabriel was in response to a situation that happened on council where they were receiving text messages while they were in meetings. And so I thought that it was understood, don't text during meetings. That was sort of like a basic. So the idea that they're texting, and not just anyone, but texting each other, um, is very concerning.
All right. So I do want to note we reached out for comment to the state attorney last Thursday and again yesterday. We have not heard back. We also reached out yesterday to Council President Kevin Carrico, Councilmember Mike Gay, and Councilmember Ron Salem because they're the three that were mentioned in your letter, in your request for an investigation, and none of them have responded. So you were concerned about this initial conversation that happened at the Neighborhoods Committee meeting. You sent a letter to the state attorney a couple weeks ago, not quite, on the 13th?
I think that's about right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
asking for her to investigate, and what have you heard?
Nothing.
Okay,
Nothing.
and so you sent that initial letter, and then there was sort of some subsequent allegations that emerged over this issue of Jaguars tickets.
Right. So then there was another story. We're talking days later, where Ron Salem filed a bill about the tickets and how they're divided between city council and the mayor. And he stated that Council President Carrico had an incident with the mayor's office and told him to file the bill. And that has evolved in different explanations, but obviously now we've got a situation where here's another conversation happening outside of the sunshine. And in addition to that, Salem mentioned that this was common and that he did it during his administration as council president. So now we're seeing a greater pattern of behavior that is really concerning if you have council presidents who don't understand the Sunshine Law.
So we do have a soundbite from Ron Salem where he was talking to our colleagues at News for Jax about this matter. Let's just take a quick listen.
So President Carrico was involved in something with the mayor's office and asked me to draft legislation that would split everything. We're a co-equal branch of this government so that we can get our share and pass them on to our constituents and such as well.
So he's there basically acknowledging that this contact happened outside of a city council meeting and that he was requested to draft this legislation, and he did. So after that happened, you sent a second letter to the state attorney.
Yes, I sent a second letter pointing out here we have again days later and the evidence of now a pattern of behavior. And again, asking for, well, demanding an investigation because the state attorney's office, of course, has that power in their criminal, violations that occur when the Sunshine Law is violated.
And so you have also not heard back from that.
No, I have not heard anything.
Today you have perhaps a different letter that you're going to send. Tell us about that one.
Yes. So, there are other options that are available. And this is something that is so important to us as citizens that this doesn't just stop at where one person has the ability. So, I'm sending a letter to the governor's office. The governor has the power to appoint a prosecutor, another state attorney, to investigate the matter. He has certainly done this in the past. And he has this ability if there's a conflict or if the current state attorney is unwilling or unable to do an investigation. And I believe we have both of those here.
And so, in terms of a conflict in your draft letter to the governor, you're talking about a perceived conflict.
Yes. So Tim Baker is someone who's been heavily involved in politics over the last decade or so, I'd probably say. He's very connected with Lenny Curry and Lenny Curry's political committees. He was very involved in Melissa Nelson's campaign in 2016. Between her campaign and her PAC, they paid over $400,000 to Data Targeting, which is his company. And then looking at other records, Ron Salem in particular definitely had Tim Baker data targeting working on his campaigns. And they were involved in pretty much any Republican campaign that was going on for city council. So there is certainly the potential for there to be a conflict, given that, they've all used the same political consultant.
In your letter to the governor, you're pointing out this conflict. I mean, people have political consultants that they share. It's a small town. What is it about Tim Baker that you think would present any kind of particular conflict for somebody like Melissa Nelson? I mean, she hasn't even really had a contested race for 2 election cycles.
Right. So, when even the JEA controversy was going on, that issue was raised because Tim Baker was heavily involved. He's not just a political consultant for campaigns, he's heavily involved in almost all the decisions that have gone on in city council for the last decade. He was very much involved in the JEA matter, and it is certainly believed he is still very involved in city council politics right now.
You had alluded before we took the break about a previous investigation that the state attorney did into several city council members. It was a year-long investigation. It did not come up with any, criminal charges, but a report was produced, and it found hours and hours of phone calls, hundreds and hundreds of phone calls between some city council members that were investigated, which seemed problematic. They're not supposed to be discussing, they can talk about their personal lives, but they're not allowed to talk about city business outside of these meetings. Do you think that there is just, kind of a culture where people are not observant of the Sunshine Law?
I think that it's been some time since we as citizens have talked about the Sunshine Law, where we've talked about how important it is for accountability and transparency. And so I think that is possible that it's become very lax with city council. And that's one of the reasons why I really want to make sure that we talk about this now, because if we let this go, it's just gonna get worse, and that's a problem.
All right. Well, attorney Leslie Jean-Bart, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.